Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I am here this beautiful Monday morning with a returning guest, Yehuda Yeshurun, and we're here to talk to you about the opportunity this week that the universe is supporting us to strengthen our innate gift of what the Kabbalists call divine inspiration. And we're going to talk about what that means, how to access it, how to differentiate it from other forms of knowing, of guidance, and really where we can utilize that gift in a more practical and profound way. The Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual energy forecast where we focus on providing our listeners with the most powerful and practical tools to help navigate the coming 7 days. I was actually listening to a lecture, a pre-recorded lecture, obviously, by our teacher, Rav Berg, and the Rav was saying there that when we know the potential positive energy that we can access and the potential negative challenges that may arise, that's like having a roadmap. The Rav didn't, I think today we would use the word GPS, but the Rav was emphasizing how if you know that there is a construction in the road or a pothole, you can avoid it. But if you don't know it's there, you're going to drive right into it. So part of what we do here on the Weekly Energy Boost is provide the lay of the land for the coming week. And we learned that through studying the texts of the Kabbalists like the Zohar, the writings of Rav Isaac Luria, and even more modern texts, and provide our listeners with those practical and powerful tools that even though we're inspired to share them by this week's energy, they really are relevant to any time. And that's why we always suggest that you go back and listen to whatever topics or episodes seem relevant to you, because the wisdom really is timeless. So Yehuda is here to share with us also part of the conversation. For me, at least, I always enjoy hearing, of course, we love hearing David's perspective, and he's always sure to share his perspective. But I love bringing other souls, other personalities onto the show so that we get a little bit of a fresh perspective, because this is a topic that we've covered in previous episodes in different ways and different angles. And because the opportunity is coming up again, we want to make sure that we highlight it, that we don't miss that opportunity. In the same way that the Rav used the metaphor of, if you don't know that the construction is there, you're going to run right into it and probably be late to wherever you're headed. At the same time, if you don't know that, the world's best bakery is on the road, you're not going to stop and pick up some croissants on the way to that meeting. So we're here to give you the croissants and the construction. How's that?
I love it. And now I'm hungry. Thank you.
Oops. Enjoy your breakfast while you listen to the episode.
Exactly. Well, so speaking of timeless, it's funny because I was really just thinking about this idea that although this is a 7-day forecast, right? Specifically this subject, this wisdom is something that if you can take what we're going to talk about and use it every day of your life will not just change, but will be phenomenally better, right? Phenomenally better. Because, and this is something people ask about all the time, right? The divine inspiration. How do I know what I'm supposed to do?
Let's define divine inspiration, because if you look at it's obviously translated from the original Hebrew, and the original Hebrew, if you would translate it directly to English, you would probably say Holy Spirit.
Right. Or Spirit of Holiness, because Holy Spirit sounds like something else.
But that's what I'm saying. It can be confusing, and one of the challenges that we have as teachers is taking the original and translating it not only precisely, but also relevantly, making sure that it makes sense to what we experience today versus 2,000 years ago.
Well, so if we're going to break that down, if we take the original Hebrew, right, it's called Ruach HaKodesh, which again means spirit of holiness. The word Ruach, which we say as spirit, we know is, and I don't really know how deep we want to go or can go, but what the Kabbalists teach are 5 levels to our soul. Nefesh, which is the most basic one, that's what gives us all of our innate physical desires of survival. So food, drink, sleep,
I think in
survive.
psychology it's called the animal soul, or the reptilian part of ourselves.
Right.
That's concerned with survival and existence and basic needs.
Right. So that's what we call the nefesh. That's the most basic part that everyone automatically has and connects to instantly as soon
Regardless
as we're born.
of you're on a spiritual path, you're not on a... It just is.
It just is. Ruach, which is the second level, is the divine, and I say divine because really what the Kabbalah teaches, we have a spark, a soul that comes directly from the Creator, right? Which is this it's this creative force that fills the universe, and you can call it whatever you want to call it. We call it the Creator. You can call it the universe, the grand unified theory, right? But it's a force that exists everywhere and within each and every one of us.
And again, regardless of how spiritual you are or how enlightened you are, everyone has it.
Everyone has it. And the ruach, what is translated often as spirit, is what allows us, what gives us the ability to differentiate between something that is positive and negative, good and bad, although those are very relative terms. I'm almost afraid to use those terms, right? Because what's good or bad? It really depends on your perspective, how much you zoom back or forth, right? But it's what gives us the ability.
What's better or worse?
What's better or worse, right? It gives us the ability of discernment. Maybe that's the best word to use. It's the ability to discern, to differentiate, to look at things and say, this is one thing, this is another thing. Why is that important? Because all of us, when we go through life, one of the biggest questions is that we ask ourselves almost on a daily basis: is this thing good for me or bad for me? And I remember the last time I was here, we spoke about family and kind of spiritual parenting a little bit, and I shared a little bit of how I grew up, and maybe we'll do another podcast on that in the future. Who knows? But one of the things that I grew up with, one of the questions my dad would ask my brother and I all the time is, before you do anything or say anything, ask yourself, is this good for my soul or bad for my soul? Because just asking the question allows me to look at things and discern, is this something that I want to do that will take me forward to where I want to be? And all of us have goals and aspirations, right? I mean, none of us just wake up in the morning and think, I don't care what happens today. All of us care what happens today. We might not know how it will manifest, or whether, it's a 1 week plan or a 1 year plan or a 10-year plan, but we all want to manifest things in our life. No one just wakes up and says, I don't care about anything. Right? So how do I manifest those things every single day? So that's really what I want to talk about, because the idea of divine inspiration or spirit of holiness is really all about it. And the way that I like to describe it, it's not like you're a prophet getting messages from God. It's a combination of hearing the messages from the universe that are all around us, hearing and reading between the lines of what happens to us when people tell us, and also that innate voice of my soul that's trying to speak to me every single day and guide me. Well, that's divine inspiration.
Theoretically, if we didn't do anything selfish, self-serving, even malicious, I know that raising kids, you sometimes encounter the idea of like retribution and revenge and things like that. If we did none of that, we would constantly receive that guidance and that clarity in those messages. But it's because I like to think of it like, imagine that there is a stream, or even let's say the sunlight, right? The sun streams constantly, but we stop receiving it when the moon, meaning think of an eclipse, right? So it's almost like our negativity eclipses that flow, and that's why we don't always experience that constant download or stream of guidance, clarity, direction, inspiration, etc.
Well, that's why the Kabbalists call it Ruach HaKodesh, the spirit of holiness, because it's not dependent on some external godlike force that says you're going to have prophecy, you're going to know what's going on, you're not. It depends on me. It's my own, what the Kabbalists call my circle of holiness, in fact, right? How aware am I and active am I in being a better person that then removes the spiritual fog that prevents me from hearing the messages that are there all because our soul is talking to us every day.
It's a constant broadcast.
It doesn't stop, right? This show stops after 45 minutes, right? Then you got to wait one more week until your next weekly energy
we have
boost.
a large library of episodes you can listen to. You
We
don't
do.
have to wait.
But the soul never stops broadcasting. It's us that create the fog, that put up these curtains that block the messages from coming in.
Right. So what would be some practical real life applications, uses of this ability that we all have? And then we can get into strengthening it.
Well, how often every day do we encounter a fork in the road and we're not sure what to do? How often do we encounter a decision or something we need to confront a person, right? I'm not. Let me rephrase that. I used to be terrified of confrontations. I'm much better at it, although it's still a personal struggle because as a Libra, we love having peace around us and we want everyone to like us, which is an impossible thing to want.
You're not pizza.
Unfortunately for me, I'm not pizza. I'm pineapple pizza. Some people really love me and some people just don't get it.
I'm a pineapple pizza
Okay,
fan,
well,
truth be told.
That's why we're here.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So even just knowing I need to, it's not even a fork in the road. It's not even do I do this or do I not do this. Some things I know I have to do, but I'm not sure how. I don't know what words to say. I'm not sure of how to manifest this venture because I have experiences in the past that tell me, oh, if you do this, you'll fail because you failed in the past. You use these words or you say these things or you do this, it's not going to work out. So I have all these fears and anxieties about things that I want to accomplish or people I need to confront or things just a fork in the road that I need to do. How do I make sure? How do I allow myself to be guided?
But isn't that a lot about intention? Because I think a lot of the decisions we face during the day are mindless, right? We don't even realize we're making decisions, right? That you get a text and you decide not to answer it. That was a decision. You have the option right now to grab a snack or to answer an email. That's a decision. And we don't realize, this is something that I think you hear woven throughout the wisdom of Kabbalah, is that our life is the sum total of those mindless decisions. We think that decisions that have weight are the ones that matter without realizing that the decisions, the tiny ones, the sesame seeds, accumulate. So, maybe...
Actually, I would say they are what create the weight in the big decisions, because the reason why those big decisions have so much weight, it's because it's a sum total of who I've become up until this moment. Because if I would have intention in all those moments, and instead of just mindlessly ignoring a text that's on my phone, or I would have intention in how I choose to, literally do everything, then in those moments, suddenly it's not a big weight. It's not this anxiety or stress. Those big decisions become really easy to do or to decide because of everything I've done until that moment. So the small things are actually the most important, I would say.
So how would you say then that it's really the recognition that everything counts? How do we get to that place where we're mindful enough that we're putting the weight in the right place in those small doses?
I'm really glad you said that, because that's, and this is something that I think about all the time. And I wish I would have more intention with this. This is really a good reminder for me for the next week. But what the Kabbalists call the creator, this force that fills the universe. And it's literally, even science tells us everything is energy. Atoms are energy. It's a force all around us. That's everywhere and in everything. And if we're talking about connecting to some divine energy or guidance for my soul, that means knowing that everything which is energy is connected to everything around me. So this table, this mic, everything that's around me is flowing with energy. And by being just more aware of it, and also how I treat things, right? How often do I just, take a shirt and just throw it on the floor when I'm done with it at the end of the day, or toss my shoes or whatever, right? But everything has energy, and by being aware of what it is and how I treat it, and the energy that is within it allows me to tap into that same light, because that light, that energy is feeding my soul, whether I know it or not. The same way sunlight is constantly feeding our planet, we're not actively aware of it. I mean, I know, right? We all learn in school, sunlight is necessary for photosynthesis, for bringing life to the world, but none of us think about this every day. None of us think about breathing every day. We just breathe. No one ever just like, oh, now I'm breathing. Now you're thinking about it. In 5 minutes from now, you're going to forget.
You may have breath as part of your spiritual practice, but in an automated fashion, right? When you're asleep, you don't need to remind yourself, okay, going to go to sleep for 8 hours. Don't forget to breathe.
Right.
Right.
But, and the crazy thing is the Kabbalists talk about the idea that when I breathe, I'm literally bringing life into myself in that moment. And when I exhale, that energy leaves. And so the whole idea of breathing exercises comes from a space of intention and being aware of how everything around me is feeding me energy. And
I think that you're probably pushing people's buttons with that.
So.
Unwittingly, you're pushing people's buttons, because I think that when we look at, and this is for me a lot of the why are we not connected to this guidance constantly, is that we label things as spiritual or not spiritual, important or not important, meaningful or meaningless. And the whole idea that we can write someone off, meaning, yes, I'm meeting a colleague of mine and we're both spiritual, so I'm going to be on my spiritual best behavior. But when I am at the supermarket, who cares? I can be as selfish, as arrogant, as ignorant, as all the fill in the blank for what qualities you find distasteful, right? I don't need to behave. Or, let's say I'm dealing with somebody who is negative, or where next to our house, next to our apartment building, there's a construction site, literally 6 years running. The place is not open yet. And the person who runs, I don't know if it's the owner or whatever, is a famous neighborhood button pusher, right? He is just, they're using our dumpster, they're throwing things onto our property, just like no shortage of opportunities to be proactive and to let go and to be kind. But sometimes in interacting with him, it's like I can't even muster the spiritual strength to treat him with decency, because I feel he's so abusing us and our neighbors and our neighborhood, right? That our community, I could go on. That's not what this week's episode is about. But my point is, looking at the scenario, and, you guys as witnesses to at least the part of the story I'm telling you, this, construction at 5 a.m., which is against the law, all kinds of whatever nonsense. Why do I need to treat him kindly? Why do I need to be a spiritual person when I engage with him? Because he is the opposite of spiritual. The moment I make that decision, and it's a mindless decision, right? I'm probably not even going to give it too much thought. I eclipse myself. I put an eclipse between me and that broadcast. I switch the broadcast off. And I'm sharing that particular example because I think even as spiritual people, we allow ourselves our teacher would say, the luxury of being I can't afford that luxury, is really what Yehuda is saying. If I want that constant, I think on a mundane level, you could say, if I want to be at the right place at the right time all the time, I can't afford to behave like that. That is actually, what's funny is, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, a lot of people who are listening, whether they chose it or not, were raised in a religious way. And in a lot of religious beliefs and practices or teachings, there is this concept that God chooses, if you're receiving messages, it's because God chose you, right? And I think I get questions all the time from people where they're looking at someone out there and they're saying, this is a bad person. Why are good things happening to them? Why do they seem so lucky? We had a listener maybe 3-4 months ago ask, why do things seem so easy for that person and so hard for me? And it's really in that the decision to choose to see things differently, that then from that decision, you begin to create your reality in a different way, so that you are connected to that. Even when things don't go your way, you're connected enough to that stream that you see, you feel. I think seeing is maybe too intellectual. You feel that even though it didn't go the way you wanted it to, it is still the best thing for you. So part of it, I think, is about choosing, you to use the word intention, but it's really making that decision that there is no part of my life that is outside of spirituality, that is outside of the domain of the creator or the universe. It is all connected, which is what Yehuda was saying before. And therefore, I can't afford to be separate or detach myself from that.
Right. There's, what's that African proverb, right? If you've ever think you're too small to make a difference, you've never been in a dark room with a mosquito. But it's not just true of who we are as people and the influence we can have on the environment around us and on the world, but it's also true in how we view everything around us. Everything is important. Every situation, every interaction that I have, everything that's around me, right? That everything is important. And it's funny you mentioned our neighbor who's got all this construction stuff going on, right? Every day we're constructing our reality with the decisions we make consciously or unconsciously. And it's so important to be aware of those decisions, because that's how I remove that fog, that's how I remove that eclipse, like you said, and allow myself to hear these messages or put up more blockages and create more darkness so that I actually just don't see or hear anything that I'm supposed to.
You're reminding me, I have, for me, one area where I really struggle to behave. The area where it's hardest for me to behave 24/7 is really with my kids. And I'm sure that there is, parents everywhere that are listening are giving me a standing ovation right now. It is difficult to be mindful and proactive all the time. Maybe I should say that my issue is more patience. I lose my patience most easily. The construction guy, I've already learned, he doesn't deserve it. You know what I mean? Why does he need to be the one that takes away my broadcast from the creator? So I don't go there anymore. But I find myself most often losing my cool with my kids. And I don't mean flying off the handle, throwing dishware. I mean just being short or not being thoughtful about what am I saying, the tone that I'm using, what are their needs right now, and am I in tune with them, or it's maybe it's also at home, you sort of let your guard down a little bit, you get to be the truth is that the camera is always on. And that's one of the things I both love and hate about reality, is that everything counts. Now, if you take it in a positive way, that means that even the things you do when no one is looking can grow your light bank account, meaning you don't need applause or a thank you or any sort of recognition or acknowledgement in order for positive, transformative, constructive progress to be counted. But at the same time, it means that even when you're, it's, 3:00 in the morning, not that this is inherently negative, but let's say you're working on, let's not talk about the refrigerator at 3:00 in the morning. Let's say, again, a person gives you an absolutely good reason to be angry, to be to say something sarcastic, underhanded, so just not to be your best self, that you realize that even though they deserve it, you don't deserve it. That to me was such a big aha moment, is that if I really love myself, I won't do it. The actual act of selfishness is more an act of self-hate than it is a self-love. And the moment that I realized that, I was able to take, and again, as Yehuda said before, it's a work in progress. It's not like I'm sitting at the top of the mountain and waiting for you all to get to the top and meet me there. But the realization that, actually, I'm looking at this direction. Usually on almost every episode, David finds a way to work in the concept of restriction, which, to the man on the street really means letting go, right? Being able to identify, I have this attachment, I have this need, I'm looking for a quick fix or instant gratification, and I manage somehow to maintain or to remind myself, this is not really what I want. I want to get it in a different way, and I let go of that immediate need. So in that moment, it's like the realization that even though not having the chocolate cake at 3:00 in the morning when no one's looking feels like hard, feels difficult. Obviously, if you've listened to it for any period of time, chocolate cake is not my issue. But if standing in front of the refrigerator at 3:00 in the morning and not taking the chocolate cake feels difficult, that is actually a more loving gesture to yourself than it is eating the chocolate cake and giving into that urge. Why am I saying it? Because that accumulation, we spoke, I guess, maybe 15, 20 minutes ago about this idea that those small mindless choices accumulate, and then it almost feels like when you have those big decisions, there is no choice, right? The weight of the accumulation of those small choices basically pulls you into a lower reality because of the accumulation of that. The reframing of that, maybe that's the right way to say it, the reframing of that process as an act of self-love, that choosing the thing that might be more difficult for me right now, choosing the thing that requires more discipline, more mindfulness, more compassion, more resilience, maybe I need to shut my mouth even though I really want to say something, not saying something, if that's what's hard for you. If it's hard for you to speak up, the act of speaking up is the act of self-love. That reframing helped motivate me 1,000,000 times better, or helps, I should say. The more that I remember that, the more it helps me, because I realize I don't want the fog. I want to be in the right place at the right time all the time. And if speaking up right now is hard for me, by not speaking up, I am creating fog. And I love myself too much to create that fog. That for me, I don't remember how many years ago I had it, and I think every time I remember it, it's another revelation of wow, that's so, look at, how can I love myself more? I can do it's more, what takes me out, the more I am outside of my comfort zone, the more I am loving myself.
I would also almost reverse engineer that from another perspective, because I'm sure there are a lot of our listeners who don't love themselves, or who struggle with self-love and experiencing that. And one of the reasons, I would say, is because we are not aware of all these things that we do unconsciously to ourselves. So if you actually want to experience more love to yourself because you're struggling with it, then just be more aware of everything that's around you. Be more aware of everything you do. Have more intention in every decision you make, because that is an act of self-love. And the more you do that, the more it actually builds that system within you. Right? Because there are a lot of people out there who really struggle with loving themselves. And then that manifests also as a struggle with loving other people. Right? And I think the world definitely needs more love.
Right.
And it's just really crazy to me.
So let's give, whenever we talk about the weekly energy and the opportunity that this week has, what we're really saying is that there will be moments strewn throughout the week that will give us the opportunity to strengthen this gift within us. let's give some examples of how those opportunities might look and what can we do this week to strengthen that gift we all have.
So the first thing I would say is wake up, and not metaphorically wake up, but in the morning when you wake up, right? One of the things the Kabbalists talk about is how important it is, or how important the first thought we have in the day is. Because the beginning of anything is the seed level, right? So, for example, whatever is in the seed, if it's a bad seed, it'll grow into a bad tree. So you want to make sure that the beginning of everything also has intention. And it's difficult for me. I'm getting a lot better at it. I know you can relate with me when it comes to mornings. They're not...
Our listeners know I'm not a morning person.
Okay, great. So I'm really, really not a morning person. I need at least a couple of hours and a cup of coffee before.
Well, the Kabbalists teach that when we wake up in the morning, our soul returns to our body after recharging. I usually say my soul comes back at around 2 p.m. You want me at my optimum time, that's when it is.
Right. But, and you know, so my alarm goes off in the morning and my first thought is, oh gosh, no. and not because I'm not excited for the day. I'm just tired. I don't feel like I've slept enough, right? I'm not, like, my brain's just not there yet for me to, and I could be really excited for everything, right? But so if your first thought is, oh no, that's going to be what your day is like. If your first thought is, and it really just takes practice and effort, because, and I know because I've gotten to a place where I can do this every so often, like my first thought in the day, like as soon as I turn off my alarm, is not check my phone. And
well, so that's what I was going to say. If you want help with this, don't sleep next to your phone.
Right.
Checking your phone first thing in the morning is a surefire way to awaken dread, fear, and loathing.
Don't do that, right? But so I turn off the alarm. My phone happens to be alarm, but I just turn it off. I put it down, and then I immediately just go, okay. And then, you know, whatever it is that I want to inject into my day. So this week, what you can do is say, I'm open to all messages that are coming my way, and I'm ready to remove the fog that's blocking me from listening to my soul. Just having that one phrase in your mind, just for a split second, and then you can go into your phone and dread and fear and loathing and all those. You probably won't if that's your first thought anyways, but if that's how you start your day, everything is just a snowball effect from that.
It's so funny because I'm thinking, you know, for many years, because you know, I had kids and everything, I was always woken up. I never actually got to wake up when I was done sleeping. So and of course I have the alarm, everybody's got to go to school and whatnot. But when one of the practices that I came to, because I really didn't have control of my first moments, whether it was I was being accosted physically by a child or just verbally. So what I used to do, and I'm saying this because I'm sure some of our listeners are saying, well, I got to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning because of my job or travel, whatever. What I used to do is before I go to sleep, do my spiritual connections, my prayers, my meditations, and really send light to the coming day, almost pre-intentions. You know, so whatever bumps in the road, I used to call them black holes in my mind. Whatever black holes there are in the day, potential dark spots in the script, I want to fill those with light right now. Whatever challenges I need to go through, I want to go through them with mercy and with acceptance, you know, not fighting whatever the universe is trying to give me. And I had all these different intentions that I put out there, knowing that those first 2 minutes weren't necessarily going to be mine in the morning. So know that this, to me, I think is one of the most beautiful things about the wisdom of Kabbalah is it's never ever too late. So that even if you do pick up your phone and you get lost in the cyclone of darkness that can completely envelop you if you look what's going on outside, the moment you realize it is the moment you stop it. And there is no, you know, the Kabbalists give us so many tools for genetically modifying that seed when we discover that it's not the best seed or that's not the seed we wanted. Even, you know, people find out after studying Kabbalah, the different things that happened in their past are affecting their relationship right now, their marriage right now. There are things that a person can do now that can alter the seed that was planted 20 years ago. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that while intention and the seed of everything, we talk about it almost every episode between the new moons and all the different things that we have going on, there is always the opportunity to intercept and modify. And so even in looking at this week where the universe is going to give us opportunity after opportunity to choose, am I going to allow the broadcast or interrupt the broadcast? Allow the broadcast, because again, this is something, as Yehuda said in the beginning, it's natural. It's happening all the time. But in the same way, you know, if you have your earphones on, you can't hear the traffic or people talking to you around you. If you're interrupting the broadcast, it's going to be a lot harder to capture those messages. So we want to be mindful this week, not only of the opportunity, and this would be a great week to practice it, right? Set your alarm to remind you, inject positive intention, start the day with gratitude. How much light do you want to reveal today? This is the best week to create that pattern, to start to create that habit. And sometimes creating a habit is about attaching it to another habit. So that if you want to attach it to, if the first thing you do in the morning is brush your teeth, spend the 2-3 minutes brushing your teeth, focusing on the positive intention. Where do you want to put your energy today? How do you want to manifest your potential today? All of those things you can, you know, that's a trick that I learned. To attach a new habit to an old habit will ensure that the habit sticks. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go on.
Do we have time for one more tool?
At least, yeah.
Okay, so so this next one, and I really like this, and this is tried and tested in my personal experience, so I can tell you this really, really works. Whenever we do get or hear that message, when the light bulb goes on, right, and suddenly we have that aha moment, and this happens, if you're connected, it happens more and more often, right, and if you set your intention in the beginning of the day, it can happen more and more often. But when it happens, immediately, don't be like, oh, I got a message, I'm happy now, I really like this, I did the spiritual work. Don't relax in that moment. And when I say relax, like immediately ask for another message, but like immediately. And it'll happen in a minute or 5 minutes later. At least for me, this happens like really instantly. You get another message, because as soon as those curtains open, and I really like it, just this metaphor is really cool, but as soon as the curtains open and you get some of that light from your own soul, why stop there? If the gates are open, ask for more. Don't settle for less and be like, oh, this was my message. Now I can wait until tomorrow for the next one.
It's probably difficult for people also, because sometimes when you get the answer you need, you're relieved and you're full for that moment. And it can cause, not in a bad way, right? Even if you feel so much appreciation and so much gratitude and how the tools work and how amazing, if you stop there, you're actually limiting. So even if you don't have a question, I think is what Yehuda is saying, ask for another message. It doesn't have to be specific, because that can be actually confusing. You know, if you sit and mull something over for a couple hours and come to a conclusion about it, you weigh your options, you have your list of pros and cons, and then at the end of it, you think you know what the message is. That might not be the message. The messages usually come in an abstract way, or when you're not thinking about it. So that's part of the letting go, is you have the desire to know, you're looking for the answer, but you also are willing to detach and let the correct guidance come in a way out of nowhere.
I mean, so the message is probably, the answer is probably going to be something like you'd mentioned this earlier, is not going to be something that's easy for me to do or comfortable for me to do, because when we ask messages from the universe, when we have questions, usually we have a particular answer or direction in mind, and we have an agenda, and we're like, please let that be the answer, please let that be the answer. And more often than not, it's just not going to be the answer, because
sometimes we ask the question, this is the right answer, right?
So
that's not the way to ask the question, is what we're saying.
So because we're not here to have an easy time, we're here to have a fulfilled time, we're here to have an enlightening experience of life, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be in the path most traveled by more often, right? And so we want to also be open to the answer that maybe I don't want to hear, because it's not going to be as comfortable for me to put into practice and do. Right.
That's probably the message that nobody wants to hear today. So listen to that twice, more than twice. I think also the truth is that part of ourselves that knows better knows that that's the case, right? We're hoping that the real answer is easier than the answer we know to be true. And at the end of the day, I say this to students all the time when I'm working with them one-on-one. What is so hard about the thing you don't want to do? And when you really ask yourself that question, I mean, to your point, Yehuda, I also am not a fan of confrontation. And sometimes the last question I have to ask myself when I need to have a conversation with somebody is, what is so hard about this conversation that you don't want to do it? And inevitably, it's nothing, right? It's really, to me, sometimes it just feels like the cellular memory from previous confrontations is the barrier, that I don't want to have a repeat of the rejection or the argument or whatever else happened. But at the end of the day, what are we really so afraid of? And I'll tell you a really funny story, something that a student of mine, very practical, very simple example. She has this whole bedtime practice now that she's studying Kabbalah, her prayers, her meditation. She does a little reading before she goes to sleep. And she knows the value of actually doing it sitting on her bed, in the space of sleep, right? But her husband watches TV before he goes to bed. And on one hand, she really wants to do it this way, but on the other hand, she doesn't want to bother him. She doesn't want to get into it with him. And I said to her, I don't remember the exact conversation, but it was kind of like, well, what's the worst that can happen? It won't change is the worst that can happen, right? He's not going to leave you because of this conversation, right? Like, what are you worried about? So she ended up having the conversation with him like the next day. And his basic response was, the only reason I watch TV is because you're reading. Like, I'd go to sleep right away if you weren't doing other things. So cool. And if I want to watch something, I'll go downstairs. And hugs and kisses. And that's how it ended. And it was just a funny, sort of the universe made it almost an exaggerated result of peace, love, and harmony as a result of the confrontation, so that she could see that whatever apprehension there was, it was actually fake. Like, there was nothing to be afraid of. And in her mind of having, and this is, I think, one of the big lessons about this week and being really in tune, is that all the while in her head, she's thinking, I don't want to bother him. He's going to be upset. And in a weird way, it was creating distance between them. She was holding something inside that she wanted to talk about that she felt she couldn't. And there's like this illusion of, we have a problem in our marriage, when it wasn't. So part of that divine inspiration is being connected to the fact that I am being guided to do something, despite how uncomfortable it may be. It is going to be better when it's done. And again, going back to that self-love thing, if I really love myself and I love my spouse, I'm going to have the conversation, even though I'm worried about the discomfort. What am I really worried about? The end result will always be good. Even if the end result is an argument, the end result will always be better. So, I don't know, something else you want to add before we close out?
Yeah, I just want to add just to that point. The more that you love yourself with these actions of intention, then those movies you have in your head that are running constantly of, he's not going to like me, he's going to say this is going to happen, and you're going through all of these Hollywood productions in your mind of all of the worst possible scenarios, the more that you love yourself in the small moments and in actively doing things with intention, then those movies will stop playing or will not be as loud, because they're only playing because there's spiritual fog. That's the only reason why you
Smoke
can't
and
see.
mirrors. It's all smoke and mirrors.
It's literally all smoke and mirrors. You can't see what's on the other side of it because there's all this fog. And there's only fog because you're not loving yourself through your actions and words and your thoughts. And it's just like almost like a catch-22. So the more you do that, then you actually can see. That's the idea of these messages. What our soul is telling us, you'll see, and then it just won't be scary, or it'll be so much less scarier every time.
Yeah, and I think that particular example ended up being a big motivator for her to have all of those other conversations that she expected would be difficult or go badly, because it actually made things much better. Not only is she having the nighttime preparation experience she wanted, but her husband is happier, and they're more in sync than ever in that respect. So look out this week for those opportunities to clear the fog, to step out of an old movie, and to do the uncomfortable. Maybe that's really the directive, is seek out the uncomfortable this week, because the result will be greater clarity, more messages, more perfect timing, more being in the right place at the right time, more having the right words at the right time. The discomfort is where the broadcast lies. And making those decisions will accumulate so that the difficult decisions won't even be that difficult anymore. How was that for a summary?
I love that.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I'm inspired.
Well, let's go out and do it.
Let's do it.
The world will be a better place. That was a PSA. The Weekly Energy Boost is on every single podcast platform: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. You can find this month's offers for our listeners at www.weeklyenergyboost.com. You can also email us any questions, topic suggestions, guest suggestions at energyboost@kabbalah.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also share, rate, like, and review what we just did. That actually allows us to reach even more people, and the more that you share, the more impact what we share has on the world. So thank you for doing that. Thank you, Yehuda, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next week on the Weekly Energy Boost.